Hallo, hallo, hallo. Ja, da prøver jeg meg igjen, jeg. På noe jeg ikke kan. Men det ser ut som at jeg lærer etter hvert. Så eh, hovedmålet med det som jeg driver med, da, det er i hvert fall å komme ut med informasjon. Så det andre av tekniske ting, det får andre ta seg av. Der er nok alternativ medie blitt mye flinkere. Men får jeg tid, så skal jeg sitte med det greiene her, jeg òg. Det må jo bli bare bedre og bedre, skulle du tro. Det var ikke verst å ha to stykker på en fredagskveld. Og klokka 7, det er vel forberedelse til brød og sirkus, holdt jeg på å si. Så, men det er nå så. Det er helt i orden. Det er bare koselig at jeg hadde vært fornøyd med en også, ja, som hadde vært innpå her. Så jeg kan jo si såpass at disse videoene som jeg legger ut, får lov til å legge ut på Facebook, dem tar jeg også og kjører over på YouTube. Så for dem som er interessert, så er det jo egentlig bare å gå over der. Og det hadde jo vært kjekt om dere hadde abonnert, da. For det kommer nå fremover, så skal jeg plage dere med en video hver eneste dag, for at nå har jeg mye stoff. Og det som er av stoff som jeg kommer med nå, det er ifra Davos. Jeg har fulgt med på direktesendinger, for de sender jo direkte. Og det artige der, det er at faktisk når jeg tar opp, for jeg laster ned til PC-en, når jeg da har lastet den ned til PC-en, og går inn bare for moro skyld, og så kjører den sendingen en gang til i opptak, enten så da har de altså slettet store deler av sendingen. De slettet også like etterpå noe som ble sagt av noen personer. Det ble også slettet like etterpå under sending. Så den personen da som pratet om ting som de da ikke ville ha ut. Så men det er noe sånn. Så det som jeg kommer til å gjøre da i forbindelse med de sendingene som jeg skal ha videre fremover fra Davos, det er altså de slutningene og kommentarene som jeg kommer med da, de står jeg selv for. Slik at andre må jo selvfølgelig da ha andre meninger enn det jeg har. Og som jeg har sagt tidligere, altså jeg driver på en slik måte at, og tenker så at folk som ser og hører på det her, de får gjøre seg opp egne meninger. Og selvfølgelig, hvis det er så at man har kommentarer, bemerkninger til det jeg sier, så er det egentlig bare å komme igjen. Ja, så jeg står for alt jeg sier og gjør, så jeg er ikke redd. Og det kan jeg si dere før jeg slipper løs. Det er i første omgang to korte videoer som jeg vil at dere skal se. Dette er videoer som har blitt slettet på YouTube, men som jeg har klart å få tak i på andre måter. Slik at de videoene som jeg kommer til å sende fra 50-åra, fra USA, og da går det på det som jeg starta gruppa med, geoengineering. Spraying, chemtrails, og jeg skal da snakke litt om de forskjellige kjemikaliene, forskjellige grunnstoffene, ettervirkninger, eller også noe symptomer. Og det som går på ettervirkninger og symptomer, det som jeg kommer til å fortelle om, det er da hentet inn blant befolkninga i USA fra enkelte områder eller stater. Så det blir i hvert fall 2 videoer av dem, og de er vel på mellom 6 og 10 minutter. Og etter det så tenkte jeg det at jeg kunne svare på noe hvis det var noen som hadde noen spørsmål, slik at vi kunne snakke om de tingene. Bare for å ha sagt det, for å gjøre folk litt mer nysgjerrige enn det virker som at folk er i dag. Altså, på det som kommer fra Davos, så kan jeg si at det er ikke til det gode for oss mennesker, og ja, alt liv på jorda. Så da har jeg i hvert fall sagt det. Og det kommer til uttrykk for i de videoene også. Det er ikke noe som jeg har funnet på. Så sånn er nå det. Så får vi se om vi klarer å finne ut av dette greiene her da. Og så setter jeg i gang, og så håper jeg det at dere får forme dere det som er der, fordi at en av videoene er kanskje litt dårlig lyd på. Det har jeg prøvd også å justere, men så lenge originalen har dårlig lyd, så er det umulig for meg å gjøre noe videre.
And CIA germ warfare experiments emerged in the public press. Surprisingly, many of those experiments were conducted in U.S. cities and were directed against U.S. citizens. In the 1950s, for example, a germ fog had been sprayed by a Navy ship at San Francisco, according to the Los Angeles Times. In an experiment designed to determine both attack and defense capabilities of biological weapons, a Navy ship blanketed San Francisco and its neighboring communities with a bacteria-laden fog for 6 days in 1950, according to U.S. military records. The records contain the conclusion that nearly every one of San Francisco's 800,000 residents was exposed to the cloud released by a Navy ship steaming up and drawn just outside the Golden Gate. The aerosol substance released by the ship contained a bacteria known as Serratia, which was believed to be harmless by the military at the time, but which has been found since to cause a type of pneumonia that can be fatal, which sounds like the same similar stuff they're putting in the chemtrails, you know. People have died from these mysterious respiratory illnesses that the doctors claim they don't know, they know nothing about, they've never seen. Yeah, right. You know, people go in with these upper respiratory infections and stuff from chemtrails, obviously, and they're saying, "Oh, we don't know what this is. We've never seen this before." And the next thing you know, your daughter's dead. Same stuff, man. They've been testing stuff on us and continue to test stuff on us and have for years. It's never stopped. People act like these, testing stuff on human populations are isolated incidents. It's no isolated incident. It's an ongoing program. The LA Times added that at least 12 people who were hospitalized around that time for Serratia pneumonia, one of them died, and that was just the beginning. The Army disclosed that it had conducted 239 open-air tests between 1949 and 1969. Of those, 80 were admitted to have contained actual germs. The tests were directed at Washington, D.C., New York City, Key West, Panama City, Florida, and San Francisco. If we accept the Army's figure of 80 live disease experiments, we discover an average of 4 germ attacks against U.S. cities every year for 20 years. Other government documents have revealed additional CIA germ warfare experiments carried out in the same manner. This means that every major U.S. city and several major U.S. population areas were under fairly intensive germ bombardment for an admitted 20-year period, all by the nation's own military and intelligence organizations. These germ experiments reportedly ended in 1969. However, justified suspicions have arisen about sudden outbreaks of more recent diseases, especially those which do not seem to conform to our understanding of epidemiology.
First tonight, Spotlight can reveal the Dorset village, which has suffered a series of birth defects, was exposed to enormous quantities of chemicals in 1959. Families in East Lulworth are already demanding a public inquiry into germ warfare tests carried out in the 60s. Now documents show chemicals were dumped by aircraft over Dorset in quantities that were up to 1,000 times greater than the rest of the country. Our environment correspondent Simon Hall has this exclusive report.
The aim of the airborne tests was the same as those carried out from ships, to examine how vulnerable Britain was to a germ warfare attack. This, though, is the first time a chemical known to be toxic was used, zinc cadmium sulfide. Scientists say the cadmium is the most worrying component. It is carcinogenic, and studies have shown it can cause birth defects in rats. It's unclear if it could have the same effect in humans.
Its health effects include damage to the lungs, kidneys, and to the liver, and also cancer of the lungs and prostate have been found.
The test was carried out in August 1959. A plane flew above the North Sea, then along the English Channel, spraying the chemical. Typical numbers of particles detected were 0, 1, 8, 12, and a maximum of 38. But when the plane reached the end of its track, something happened. That resulted in Dorchester sampling 4,315 particles. There was no sample point at East Lulworth, but it lies directly in the chemical's path. The experimental reports give no indication as to why such high levels were recorded at Dorchester, but scientists I've spoken to believe one of two things happened. Either something went wrong and a large amount of the chemical was released accidentally, or, being the end of the experiment, the remaining chemical was deliberately discarded.
The virus would immunize against this VMAT2 gene, and that would have the effect that you see here, which is it's essentially to turn a fanatic into a normal person. And we think that will have major effects in the Middle East.
How would you suggest that this is going to be dispersed? The aerosol?
Well, so the present plan and the tests that we've done so far have used respiratory viruses, such as flu or rhinoviruses. And we believe that that's a satisfactory way to get the exposure of the largest part of the population. Most of us, of course, have been exposed to both of those viruses. And we're quite confident that this will be a very successful approach.
This is fascinating. What's the name of this proposal?
Yeah, so the name of this project is FunVax, which is the vaccine for religious fundamentalism.
And you have a proposal already?
The proposal has just been submitted, and I think that the data that I have shown you today would support the development of this project, and we think it has great promise.
February 1956. In the heart of New York, Operation Big City was underway. A Ford Mercury, specially adapted with a hidden exhaust pipe, pumped out bacteria onto the streets of Manhattan.
And CIA germ warfare
i tenna. Så kvikksølv et farlig stoff, selvfølgelig. Så da bare kjører vi i gang.
1991, the World Health Organization acknowledged that the predominant source of human exposure to mercury is from your fillings. That should be of concern to anyone. So all mercury silver fillings leak substantial amounts of mercury constantly. The amount increases with any kind of stimulation, and as a result, mercury from fillings produces the majority of human exposure to mercury. The International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology is extremely concerned about the anecdotal claims of safety by manufacturers and dental trade associations that are at variance with the published peer-reviewed scientific evidence to the contrary. The precautionary principle requires action once the possibility of harm exists. It does not require proof beyond a shadow of a doubt that in the case of heavy metal and xenobiotic exposure is both nearly impossible and unnecessary, in our opinion. What you're seeing is mercury vapor coming off a 25-year-old silver amalgam filling in an extracted tooth. The background is a phosphorescent screen. The mercury vapor absorbs the fluorescent light, and you can see it as a shadow on the screen. This is mercury coming off a filling that was dipped in water that's the same temperature as the human body. This is a filling that was rubbed with a pencil eraser for just a few seconds. Like going to the hygienist and having her clean your teeth. These are not small amounts of mercury. If you can see it, it's more than 1,000 times higher than the Environmental Protection Agency will allow for the air that we breathe. What about the last time you went to the dentist and they drilled on your tooth? Here is the mercury vapor every time you raise the temperature to 110 degrees with hot coffee or warm water, or even chewed on it. Mercury comes off fillings every time you stimulate them, and that stimulation causes the mercury to continue to leak out of the fillings for an hour and a half at a minimum. Some people grind their teeth. Some people chew gum. The dentist might send an old gold crown to the dental lab to be welded. How about the dental personnel? They're not being given informed consent. Back in 1985, the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology set out to determine the amount of mercury that was coming off fillings. And here's the graph, showing substantial quantities of mercury were measured coming off fillings. And then we estimated the total dose. And then we began animal experiments and put radioactive fillings in sheep. Mercury accumulated in the jaw, stomach, liver, and kidney of the sheep in just 30 days. Substantial quantities of mercury spread from the fillings to every organ in that sheep's body. Then we measured that the sheep's kidneys dropped in their ability by 60% to clear inulin, an indication of kidney malfunction. Whole body imaging of monkeys found exactly the same thing. Proponents of amalgam fillings claim that sheep chew too much. Well, what's the problem with monkeys? They had mercury in their jaw, kidneys, liver, intestine, and heart. And further research found dystrophic bacteria that were antibiotic resistant cropped up in the intestines within 2 weeks of receiving these mercury-leaking fillings. Further studies have found damage to the ADP ribosylation of brain neuron proteins. In response to the controversy, and at the request of the Federation of Experimental Scientists and Biologists, Drs. Fritz Leuscheider and Murray Vimy wrote an editorial, the first ever in FASEB, that point by point refuted the claims of the amalgam proponents. That should be of concern to anyone wanting to have healthy children, because mercury is highly damaging to fetuses. Experiments in sheep showed that mercury from the sheep's fillings transferred immediately to the placenta, to the unborn fetus, and to every conceivable portion of the fetus's body. It even increased in the lamb higher after birth from mercury in the mother's milk. There's no such thing as a safe mercury filling. All mercury fillings leak mercury. The combined effect of mercury, cadmium, and lead is just now being investigated, but it's not 1 and 1. It's synergistic, and 1 and 1 may make 100 or even 1,000. Why is that of concern? Over and over again, we've heard that children are exposed to lead from our environment. Mercury and lead is many times more toxic than just mercury alone. These black, corroded, pitted mercury fillings are used where you must drill away a third of the tooth in order to fix a pinhead-sized cavity. Even if you love mercury, it's the wrong thing to do to the children. It leads to broken, diseased, root canal extracted teeth throughout the rest of the life. It's a blunder that costs the child all through their life. Millions and millions of dollars are spent annually fixing teeth again and again. And dentists don't follow the manufacturer's recommendations. They pack mercury in children around gold crowns, underneath bridges. They stuff it around the gum line in contact with tissues. There's mercury spreading from this gold crown to every tissue in that patient's body. Even if you like mercury fillings, putting that kind of filling in the tooth is simply the wrong thing to do. Harold Lowe, the former director of the National Institute of Dental Research, back in 1993, wrote, "The first filling is a critical step in the life of the tooth. Using amalgam for the first filling requires removing a lot of tooth substance, not only diseased tooth substance, but healthy tooth substance as well. So in making the undercuts, you sacrifice a lot, and this results in a weakened tooth. The next thing you know, the tooth breaks off, and you need a crown. Then you need to repair the crown. And so it continues to the stage where there's no more to repair, and you pull the tooth. With the first filling, you should do something that can either restore the tooth or retain more healthy tooth substance. Use new materials, composites, or materials that can bond to the surface without undercuts. You can do this with little removal of the tooth substance so that the core of the tooth is still there. I would add that the cost of all that dental repair over and over again makes the cost of mercury fillings enormous, even if you don't consider the neurological impairment and the brain damage that they surely cause in dental personnel, and the infertility and the heartbreak that they've caused to so many families. It is the opinion of this Academy that responsible government agencies should prohibit the use of these fillings until such time as their manufacturers produce the alleged evidence of safety.
I've seen the smoking teeth video, and I show this to all of my patients who discuss to me mercury toxicity. They say, well, how could this mercury filling be causing me problems? I've had them in for 30 years. The video ends that discussion and brings the seriousness to the patient of what a problem this is.
Some people might question that the smoke we see coming off the amalgam filling might not actually be mercury. The fact that it is mercury can easily be demonstrated with a Jerome mercury vapor analyzer. The tooth is first cooled and then analyzed with the mercury sniffer. The Jerome shows that there are no emissions coming off a cooled dental amalgam. Then we stimulate the surface with a small explorer, scraping gently. And the Jerome takes another 10-second sample. California maximum contaminant level for mercury at the hazardous waste dump is 100. This filling is well over that level in just seconds of stimulation, thus demonstrating beyond doubt that amalgams leak mercury anytime they are stimulated.
In a class that I teach at the University of Kentucky called Mercury Science and Politics, I have the students do the same experiment as you see in that smoking tooth video. We use a fluorescent screen, an amalgam filling made outside the mouth, and a UV lamp. And we turn off the lights in the classroom. I have the students do this with their own hands, and they hold the amalgam in front of the fluorescent screen, and they see this vapor coming off, and we tell them that's mercury. And the way we establish that it's mercury is that we use a mercury vapor sniffer, and we take it up to the amalgam tooth and take a sample, and it shows that that is indeed mercury, that is the vapor coming off. We then have the students take a toothbrush, a store-bought toothbrush, and they brush that amalgam filling for 30 seconds as if they were brushing their teeth. And they pull it away and they look, and indeed the amount of mercury vapor coming off has increased dramatically. Again, we use the mercury vapor sniffer. We take an analysis of that vapor, and what it shows is that the mercury vapor coming off that tooth has gone up about 10-fold.
It continues to amaze me how blind medical and dental profession has been about the seriousness of mercury toxicity. For well over 100 years. The severity of mercury and the toxicity of it has been well recognized. But even to this day, the dental profession continues to put 100 tons of mercury fillings in the mouths of Americans every year.
I had a patient in her 50s who was in perfectly good health when she read information about amalgam fillings being potentially dangerous, and as a result went to her family dentist requesting to have her fillings replaced with non-toxic material. And in the course of 2 days, she had 18 fillings removed without any type of protection to prevent mercury vapor from entering her system. Within 2 weeks, she began developing irreversible neurologic damage that was ultimately diagnosed as Parkinson's disease, and now she is permanently disabled.
I think one of the major things that I'm concerned with is I go around telling people we should get rid of amalgam fillings. They shouldn't be used. This may cause some people to rush out and get their amalgams removed by someone who won't take care of removing them safely. Research has shown that if you do not take safety precautions, the mercury level in your blood can go up 3 or 4-fold higher at least. Because when you put the drill on the amalgam filling, you heat it up and vapors start coming out, and the patient and the dentist start breathing those vapors. If you use a safe procedure, such as putting an oxygen mask on the dentist and on the patient, and using certain techniques that have been developed by the IAOMT dentist, you can decrease the amount of mercury exposure to the patient and to the dentist. And this is critical because anyone that's not feeling well or cannot excrete the mercury is going to get a large dose of mercury on having their amalgams removed, unless they use the techniques that prevent them from breathing the mercury vapor that's being generated during the removal.
Recently, a 52-year-old physician in good health decided to have his mercury fillings replaced. He immediately became ill within 2 weeks and would have died had he not had a heart transplant. He had developed idiopathic dilated cardiomyopathy. Research has linked this often fatal heart problem to mercury. IDCM heart has 22,000 times more mercury in it than a heart that's sick for cardiovascular reasons. You need to be protected when mercury fillings are removed. Everyone, including the European Union, the American Dental Association, the amalgam manufacturers, and the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, agree that removing old mercury silver fillings can be dangerous because it exposes everyone present to enormous amounts of mercury. Fortunately, there are steps that any responsible dentist can take which will greatly reduce the risk and minimize everyone's exposure to this toxic metal. First, the dentist needs to understand that once a removal procedure begins, the mercury filling will spew enormous quantities of invisible, odorless, poisonous gas. This must be captured in a vacuum and removed from the vicinity of the dental personnel and the patient. Some poorly designed dental offices have vacuums that exhaust indoors, like a closet or utility room. This is wrong, because the whole office then becomes contaminated as a result. The next important step is to protect the breathing zone. This can be done for the doctor and assistant with a Mine Safety Association mask with an additional small particle filter. An even better system is like the one used for hazmat disposal experts or firemen. This provides fresh air under positive pressure. This avoids the principal problem with masks alone, which is termed suck-by, where contaminated air is inhaled around the edge of the mask instead of through the filters. For the patient, it presents a slightly different problem. Positive pressure air is strongly recommended as well. A suitable substitute is a nasal hood, similar to that used to administer nitrous oxide analgesia, but without the positive pressure. This reduces the exposure, but a rapid inhalation can suck by the edge of a nasal hood. Therefore, positive pressure is considered safer. Gloves, nitrile are preferred to latex because mercury does not appear to penetrate nitrile gloves as readily as it does latex. Personally, I prefer to use a rubber dam for many reasons, but some dentists and a few patients prefer packing the mouth with cotton. It's not important because both those procedures are approved, but remember, do not breathe in through your mouth at all, ever, during any dental procedure. Before commencement of the drilling, the patient holds a supplemental vacuum close to their chin, and the assistant should place her high-volume vacuum within 1/2 inch of the tooth. And that's not the saliva ejector, it's a big vacuum. It should remain glued to that side of the tooth until every scrap of mercury filling and the particles have been thoroughly removed and rinsed away. In addition, since mercury easily penetrates latex, a vacuum such as a saliva ejector should be placed underneath the rubber dam, and the patient should be cautioned not to breathe in through their mouth. A technique pioneered and taught by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology called the cut and chunk technique involves sectioning the old filling with a burr. In the diagram, you see the burr is placed into the filling and drawn across, cutting the filling into 2 pieces. That reduces the amount of drilling necessary to remove the filling. No diamonds, please, as that creates small particles and is potentially even more dangerous than using a burr. The dentist, using a full water spray from his handpiece and a supplemental spray from the dental assistant with her water syringe, carefully cuts the old filling in half and removes the 2 pieces. This minimizes the drilling necessary, and the water cools the filling to reduce the mercury vapor. After the filling is out, the dam and cotton rolls should be removed and the mouth thoroughly flushed for about a minute in order to remove all the particles.
We're very careful about telling patients that they better get the fillings taken out by somebody who knows how to do it properly, and we make sure that the materials they put in are ones that are biocompatible and safe before they end up exposing themselves. It's very dangerous to have fillings removed by somebody who just has a que sera attitude about putting them in.
When taking out mercury fillings, everyone is exposed to high levels of the poisonous mercury vapor. The dentist, the dental assistant, and you, the patient. When having your amalgams removed, you have a right to insist that your dentist protect you from those mercury vapors.
The major problem with mercury in all of the studies that have ever been done, like in the Minamata Bay disease, of the people that were exposed to toxic fish, the individuals that were affected the most were the babies that were in utero when the mother ate the fish. And that's because mercury concentrates in the fetus. A recent study from Sweden has shown that mercury in the cord blood that feeds the infant is double the mercury level of the mercury in the mother's blood. That's indicating that the cord blood is concentrating the mercury from the mother and is feeding the fetus, and it gets into the fetus's body. Now, our studies on the mercury in the birth hair of autistic versus controlled children, with regard to the controlled children, the level of mercury in their birth hair went up with the increased number of birth mothers' amalgam fillings. So there's almost no doubt that mercury in the birth mother, in a pregnant mother, concentrates in the fetus and can cause damage to that fetus. Mercury is neurotoxic. It has no business being in our food, and it certainly has no business being in our dental and medical treatments.
How mercury causes brain neuron degeneration. Mercury has long been known to be a potent neurotoxic substance, whether it is inhaled or consumed in the diet as a food contaminant. Over the past 15 years, medical research laboratories have established that dental amalgam tooth fillings are a major contributor to mercury body burden. In 1997, a team of research scientists demonstrated that mercury vapor inhalation by animals produced a molecular lesion in brain protein metabolism, which was similar to a lesion seen in 80% of Alzheimer's diseased brains. Recently completed experiments by scientists at the University of Calgary's Faculty of Medicine now reveal, with direct visual evidence from brain neuron tissue cultures, how mercury ions actually alter the cell membrane structure of developing neurons. To better understand mercury's effect on the brain, let us first illustrate what brain neurons look like and how they grow. In this animation, we see 3 brain neurons growing in a tissue culture, each with a central cell body and numerous neurite processes. At the end of each neurite is a growth cone where structural proteins are assembled to form the cell membrane. 2 principal proteins involved in growth cone function are actin, which is responsible for the pulsating motion seen here, and tubulin, a major structural component of the neurite membrane. During normal cell growth, tubulin molecules link together end to end to form microtubules, which surround neurofibrils, another structural protein component of the neuronal axon. Shown here is the neurite of a live neuron isolated from snail brain tissue, displaying linear growth due to growth cone activity. It is important to note that growth cones in all animal species, ranging from snails to humans, have identical structural and behavioral characteristics and use proteins of virtually identical composition. In this experiment, neurons also isolated from snail brain tissue were grown in culture for several days, after which very low concentrations of mercury were added to the culture medium for 20 minutes. Over the next 30 minutes, the neurite membrane underwent rapid degeneration, leaving behind the denuded neurofibrils seen here. In contrast, other heavy metals added at this same concentration, such as aluminum, lead, cadmium, and manganese, did not produce this effect. To understand how mercury causes this degeneration, let us return to our illustration. As mentioned before, tubulin proteins link together during normal cell growth to form the microtubules which support the neurite structure. When mercury ions are introduced into the culture medium, they infiltrate the cell and bind themselves to newly synthesized tubulin molecules. More specifically, the mercury ions attach themselves to the binding site reserved for guanosine triphosphate, or GTP, on the beta subunit of the affected tubulin molecules. Since bound GTP normally provides the energy which allows tubulin molecules to attach to one another, mercury ions bound to these sites prevent tubulin proteins from linking together. Consequently, the neurite's microtubules begin to disassemble into free tubulin molecules, leaving the neurite stripped of its supporting structure. Ultimately, both the developing neurite and its growth cone collapse, and some denuded neurofibrils form aggregates or tangles, as depicted here. Shown here is a neurite growth cone stained specifically for tubulin and actin, before and after mercury exposure. Note that the mercury has caused disintegration of tubulin microtubule structure. These new findings reveal important visual evidence as to how mercury causes neurodegeneration. More importantly, this study provides the first direct evidence that low-level mercury exposure is indeed a precipitating factor that can initiate this neurodegenerative process within the brain.
We come to a conclusion is that people who suffer from certain neurological diseases such as autism and Alzheimer's disease represent a subset of the population that for some reason, possibly genetic, they are unable to get mercury out of their cells. When the mercury gets into their bloodstream, it soaks into the cells immediately, and a healthy person or a person that can get rid of the mercury will combine that with a material in the normal cell and get rid of it, whereas someone who is unable to excrete mercury will retain that mercury and subsequently becomes afflicted.
Placing a mercury filling in my child to me constitutes an assault on my child. We know mercury comes out of these fillings. Other countries have stopped placing these mercury fillings in their children. The United States has an obligation to their children to also stop placing mercury fillings.
Mercury pollution in the environment is becoming a serious global problem, and dentists are a significant contributor to this problem. Every time an amalgam filling is placed or removed in a dental office, mercury is going down the drain, into the sewage system, into the water supply, into the fish that we eat back again. This can be stopped fairly easily. Then dental separator systems in the dental office can cut off this flow of mercury into the wastewater. When this has been done community-wide, such as in San Francisco, it showed that over 90% of the mercury going into the wastewater treatment plants was coming from dental offices.
This mercury fight, and I didn't consider it a fight when I first started. I had no dog in the fight to speak of, but I did do research on Alzheimer's disease and found that mercury would mimic many of the biochemical aberrancies that we see in Alzheimer's disease. By treating it into rats exposed to mercury vapor, or taking normal brain and treating it with mercury, we could create biochemistry that looked very similar to what we see in Alzheimer's disease. So at the very least, you could say that if mercury weren't causal, at least it would be an exacerbating factor for these diseases. Recent research that's come out has supported my concept that mercury is probably fundamentally involved in Alzheimer's disease. I don't think there's much doubt about that. This is not popular with the American Dental Association and even perhaps our Food and Drug Administration dental branch. And you cannot get support for any studies showing that mercury is involved in causation of any neurological disease. The people who fund American research, and this is easy to check out, just go to the literature, almost all the papers that talk about mercury being toxic, neurotoxic, will be submitted from foreign countries. They do have a child study where they're putting mercury in the mouths of children. I would think that they should be very critical, and they're using blood levels of mercury and urine levels of mercury to decide exposure, etc. And what our research on the autistic children shows that means nothing. I mean, children that can't excrete mercury will have low urine, low blood levels, and it will indicate that they are not exposed when indeed they are the ones that are the most susceptible. And I would suggest to people who are learned, go back and look at the Shishil's study, where they looked at mercury in children, in an island where they primarily ate fish. Look at the Faroe Island studies in the North Sea, where they again looked at children who had primarily a diet of fish and whale. And what you will see is that the children with the lowest mercury levels in their hair and blood in those studies were the ones that were the most adversely affected, whereas the children with the highest level in their hair and blood were the ones that were the least affected. What this means is that the children who are effectively excreting the mercury, are getting better and are not getting sick, whereas the children who can't excrete it are the ones that are having medical problems and neurological problems. Removing amalgams does make the population in general healthy. And when the ADA says there's no correlation between amalgam placement, amalgam existing in your mouth, and poor health, they're just ignoring the literature that they don't want to look at. Because you understand, Alzheimer's disease, autism, ALS, MS, Parkinson's are all major diseases that we haven't a clue about what caused them. We have no absolute proof. And it's not because we can't intellectually figure that out. It's because we are not given the funding to pursue the fact that maybe heavy metal toxicity, predominantly mercury toxicity, is the cause of these illnesses.
These instructions can be found on the webpage of the International Academy.
Ja, hva skal man si til dette? Det vel vi har blitt lurt i mange år, folkens. Men en annen ting jo også det at det hadde jo vært litt smart å tenke litt igjennom det som vi blir tilført, altså alt som av saker og ting som vi kjøper, eller som å kjøpe i butikker og så videre. Men og det en ting, og en annen ting det at jeg veldig redd for at vi har mer eller mindre blitt skremt opp gjennom åra, og det har vi også da, i hvert fall i de senere år, fått planta i panna av myndighetene ved personnummeret vårt. Det kanskje noe jeg kommer til å snakke om litt senere, for det noe vi ser i dag, så ser vi faktisk det at det personnummeret, det det eneste som betyr noe i livet vårt. For vi nå altså overlatt helt til staten ved det personnummeret. Underskriften din, den kan du bare glemme. Stort sett skal du ha gjort noe, eller kjøpt noe, eller så forlanges et personnummer. Og det vil også si at det kan spore deg altså helt ifra du kommer ut av livmora til mora di til du går i grava. Så vi faktisk slaver allerede når vi blir født. Og som jeg har nevnt mange ganger tidligere, at dette med at man eier noe, ikke sant? Altså, i dag så sier de jo det at du skal bare være glad. Hvordan var det igjen? Altså, du skal ikke eie noe, men likevel være glad, ikke sant? Altså, det sier jo egentlig sitt til hva de har hatt i tankene da de innførte dette her med gårds- og bruksnummer. Så bruksnummeret, det altså ditt, det det du kan bruke og henvise til angående eiendommen din. Den eier du ikke. Nå har de jo begynt å legge ut at nå kan militære eller myndighetene gå inn og overta huset ditt, bilen din, eller det myndighetene trenger for eventuelt en krig. Det kommet svart på hvitt. Men selvfølgelig så det folk vil ha brød og sirkus, og dette vet myndighetene om. Så inderlig vel. Og senere skal jeg snakke litt om det som skjer nede i Davos av disse som fra Norge. Det jo en hel delegasjon der. Men nå hadde jeg tenkt oss å kjøre noen små videosnutter fra åpninga der nede. Altså, eller de jeg har festet meg med, som der nede, det Børge Brende. Du kan snakke om Quisling, men jeg tror han går Quisling en høy gang. Det jeg ikke redd for å si. Du har Bråten, Kirsten Bråten, som konsernsjef i DNB. Hun har jeg noen videosnutter av. Du har han milliardæren, frimureren, som ble ansatt som sentralbanksjef, var det vel? Eller sjefen for dette såkalte pensjonsfondet, som de så snilt kalte, som de vel har gått over til å gi et annet navn. Og når det gjelder dette med bank, så heter det jo Norges Bank helt til at Rothschild ikke likte det at det skulle hete Norges Bank, men sentralbanken, for sentralbank, det har den jo i 190 land. Så det var bare en sånn kort, lite pauseprat. Jeg tenkte jeg skulle gå over til Børge Brende. Han må dere få med dere. Så lykke på reise, holdt jeg på å si.
Good morning. We're starting our Davos with the most important topic, the future of our planet. So it's great to see so many friends here, and also people that I had the pleasure to work with over decades that I know are very committed to making sure that our planet doesn't catch fire, and that we also use the necessary tools that we have to make sure that we get climate change under control, and that we follow up now on the pledges from Montreal. That was an amazing meeting. For the first time, we decided 30 by 2030. 30% of our nature should be protected for future generations by 2030. Since we now have 70% of nature we have decided to use. Maybe we can let those coming after us decide if about the 30% left. I don't think that's a bad idea. This is really about also making sure that this is a decade of delivery. So far it hasn't been, but it's time to change. After Sharm el-Sheikh and Rania, thank you for your leadership there, we know it's about financing. No, we have to walk the talk by also making it possible. There is a financing gap on all the pledges we have made. And we have made progress. Remember, John, before we went to Paris, we were both foreign ministers back then, and we were, yeah. We also were on track for like a 4 degrees thing. After Paris, I think it was reasonable to think that we at least could make it 3 degrees. Of course, the goal was 1.5. After Glasgow, I think we were more or less on track to 2 degrees. I think after Sharm, there is a possibility to reach 1.5, and we did not move away from 1.5. But it's now about financing. It is really making sure that available technology, both on mitigation but also adaptation, has to be implemented. And that's why we have also gathered the philanthropic community here. And we know we can do more in this field. I saw a report last night, preparing for this, that only 2% of the philanthropic funding goes to nature and climate. Philanthropy is doing a lot of very important things in many, many sectors globally. That's for sure. But I think there is a potential to step up in the area related to our planet, because here we are really defining if we are going to have really sustainability in the future. And as you can see, the Gaia initiative is very important for us. The Gaia initiative, of course, is our planet. It's Greek mythology. It's really about how we can make sure that philanthropy also does its part when it comes to saving our planet. So we have a great panel and also a lot of great people in the room that I know is super committed. I couldn't think of anyone, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, that could introduce this topic better than Secretary John Kerry. John, you have been so committed to the environment, oceans, climate, and even as Secretary of State in the US, where there is a lot of geopolitics, we know that. It's not a lack of that still. But even as Secretary of State, you put the oceans and climate on top of your agenda, and I don't know any other Secretary of State that has done it in the way you did it, and no other foreign minister. So it's a pleasure to have you back in Davos, John, my dear friend, and I'll give you the floor here. Thank you.
Settle down here and focus on the task at hand if I can. And I'm privileged to share a few thoughts with everybody here. I was sat up last night. My daughter is here. She does a lot of work in health. And we met up last night. We're sitting there talking, you know, so how do we change the way people are thinking about this and talking about it? And why is it that allegedly wise adult human beings, CEOs, some of them, United States senators, some of them, a whole bunch of folks, want to ignore science and want to ignore mathematics and want to ignore physics and somehow cannot bring themselves to do what we need to do. And when you stop and think about it, it's pretty extraordinary that we, select group of human beings, because of whatever touched us at some point in our lives, are able to sit in a room and come together and actually talk about saving the planet. I mean, it's so almost extraterrestrial to think about, quote, saving the planet. And if you said that to most people, they think you're just a crazy tree-hugging, lefty, liberal, you know, do-gooder, whatever. and there's no relationship. But really, that's where we are. You look at what's happening with species. Half the species of the planet have been already killed. And if you look at the way we live, the incredible sort of destructive process of growth, the way we interpret it, not as enlightened growth, but as a sort of robber baron growth, driven by a lot of different things. We had 18 separate $1 billion cost events in the United States last year. And you look at Pakistan, where 30 million people in one single event were displaced, and their lives were affected, extraordinary upheaval. And you run around the world. I'm not going to do it now because this group is as smart as any group, and you know what's motivating you and bringing you here. But damn it all, we have to find a way to get really serious about bringing the corporate world on board around the world. Mark, thank you for you and a whole bunch of folks who have been just brilliant leaders in really laying this out. And that's not a throwaway thank you. It's making a huge difference. There is I'm thinking for the first time in the last years, because of what Børge just said about we were somewhere around 3 degrees, 3 to 4, maybe higher, when we went to Paris. And we're not now. So there's on the one hand, on the other hand, life that we're all leading right now. On the one hand, the destruction is unfathomable. Flooding, it's just amazing, not just in California, but Nigeria, Uganda, Mozambique, and different places. And somehow we leaders, to lead, have got to be able to bring folks to the table and organize ourselves around real things that are really going to make the difference now, that tip the balance from this on the one hand, on the other. We have to make it on, here's where we are. Here's where we're moving. It's all excitement. It's all a brilliant possibility, set of possibilities because of where technology and creativity and civic efforts and the marriage of young people who want a future with folks like you here who are, close to young still, but moving on. The reality is, folks, that this is the time where we have to get it done and make it all meaningful. Now, the private sector is stepping up rather remarkably, to be honest with you, but not yet even at the level we need to be. Let's face it. Whole bunch of companies in the world have chosen to say, oh, I'm going to be net zero by 2050. And you and I, we know they don't have a clue how they're going to get there. And most of them are not on track to get there. So this on the one hand, on the other hand world we're living in is where we came out of Glasgow and where we came out of Sharm el-Sheikh. That we went from the possibility that we were heading to 3.5 degrees or more, a warming of the planet, to 1.8 degrees out of Glasgow. And if you take all the things that were promised in Sharm el-Sheikh and add them to Glasgow, you can get to 1.7 degrees. And I'm sure Fatih Birol will share that with you in one venue or another here in the next days. But we're not doing everything we promised. Nobody. And I think about what the IEA said to us a few months ago, that in order to get the 1.5 and keep it, and by the way, we have not yet lost, there's still a possibility of achieving 1.5. We make the decisions that are available to us. If we treat this for the challenge that it really is, almost like World War II, when we knew that in order to win the war, and we didn't know it in the winter of 1943, but in order to win the war, we had to organize ourselves to take control of the skies and take control of the seas and be able to smash the battlements that had been built along the coastline of France and Belgium and Netherlands and so forth. And we had to get through. We did it. And if you read Paul Kennedy's book, professor at Yale, called The Engineers of Victory, you'll read how this group of mid-level folks were making big decisions and implementing them and getting them things done. They weren't caught up in wads of bureaucracy. It didn't take them 10 years to get a siting plan for a wind farm or for a solar. We can't do that. I was talking with the White House last night with Bruce Reed and others. You know, the State of the Union's coming up, and the president's got to, you know, and I think will because he believes this. We got to move this because that's the only way we keep 1.5 degrees alive. So how do we get there? Well, the lesson I've learned in the last years, and I learned it as secretary, and I've learned it since, reinforced in spades, is money, 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 money. And I'm sorry to say that. I mean, yes, technology, yes, exciting new initiatives, yes, organizing, winning races politically. I mean, what happened in the midterms in the United States is nothing less than miraculous. And it happened because young people voted. And the second most voted issue was climate. It's a huge deal. But we have to go further. I have said this before, but I say it again. I'm convinced we will get to a low-carbon, no-carbon economy. We're going to get there because we have to. I am not convinced we're going to get there in time to do what the scientists said, which is avoid the worst consequences of the crisis. And those worst consequences are going to affect millions of people all around the world, Africa and other places. Of the 20 most affected countries in the world from climate crisis, 17 are in Africa. And if we're going to keep faith with the global south and we're going to be real about dealing with justice in this transition, then we have to make sure we're bringing the global south along, even though that's adaptation and that's resilience and talking about loss and damage and so forth. We have to do it because we have to build the political consensus that allows all of us to go forward. Now, I'm running over time, and I know that. But I want to just I get wound up on this one, folks. Here's what we need, and we're doing it with our deal that we cut with Indonesia, with what we did. Amashat knows what we did. Rania knows that the NUEFI program we put together is going to get rid of 15 gigawatts of pollution by deploying 10 gigawatts of renewables and 5 gigawatts of gas shut down. 11 turbines will be shuttered, and gas will go to Europe to help it in the context of Ukraine. Perfect sort of symmetry. And it's going to happen because we were able to put together $500 million, a big concessionary loan from Germany. Thank you, Germany. Important contributions from different entities. But we don't have time, folks, to be cobbling together bespoke deals here, there, and everywhere. We have to do it in a massive basis. And the key to that, one of the keys, is philanthropy. It's not the only key. We need governments to put public money into it. But there is no way to win this battle without, I quickly put the without with the no way to win the battle, because someone will edit it and say, Kerry said there's no way to win the battle. But truthfully, folks, the secret to this is this partnership, Gaia, putting together. At first, I thought it was a great wine, Gaia. But seriously, it's a moment where we can pull ourselves together, and we have to do this day to day and bring the private sector to the table. We have to unleash, Mark Carney knows this as well as anybody, we have to unleash the trillions of dollars for bankable deals. How do you create the bankable deals? You have to leverage. You have to bring people together to take first loss, to minimize the risk. The minute you do that, you can get a deal like we got with Indonesia, with Mexico, with Vietnam. Final thing I'll say, I've said this many times, but I want you all to focus on it. 20 countries, 20 economies equal 80% of all the emissions. You solve the problem to start with by making sure all of those 20 countries are doing what they need to do, and that includes the United States, China, Russia, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Brazil. You know who they are. We have to pull them to the table and leverage further, and I think that's doable. But time is, in fact, running out on us. So I hope everyone will look at this initiative. We've had many different initiatives. You all put money in to help us with the global methane pub. And you put money in to help us close the deals in many of these cases. So you're playing an absolutely critical role, but we've got to all figure out, how do we leverage further? How do we augment this in order to be able to win the battle? What's exciting is, and this is not false optimism, I saw a technology the other day that's going to create usable no CO2 gas, which uses existing CO2 and heat and other things to be able to put together this new sort of LNG. These are the things that are going to change the world. Batteries, there are about 70 new battery companies all of a sudden that are spouted up because of the IRA in the United States. And the reaction of other countries shouldn't be, oh my God, you shouldn't be doing that. That's putting us in an unfair position. Do it too. Everybody's got to do the same thing to accelerate this process even more. So God bless all here. Thank you for being part of this. Let's honestly show the world that we can get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Kerry, as well as Børge, for your comments. Vice President Elgo, I don't know whether you want to take a seat in front. There is a chair. You're fine? Okay.
Have a seat for you. Don't be shy.
And thank you, all of you, for being here and being part of the Gaia community. Over the last more than 50 years, the World Economic Forum has been very much focused on fostering public-private partnerships to improve the state of the world. And today is an important milestone because you've added the third P into that public-private construct to see how we can scale, catalyze, and mobilize a lot more action around climate and nature. And only if we join forces can we really move in time to deal with the challenges ahead. I have a very diverse panel here representing the public, private, as well as the philanthropic sector. And I also want to save some time for comments from the floor. So if I could turn to Mark first. Okay. Right? You've been co-chairing the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, GFANZ, for a period now, and also been a very strong force in promoting climate action, climate ambition, accountability amongst financial institutions. Can you tell us your thoughts around how Gaia could actually work with GFANZ and a lot of the many other global initiatives to support climate and nature action?
Sure, and I'll try and be brief and pick up on what Secretary Kerry was saying, and let me pick out, and actually let me salute the JETP initiatives with
Ja, jeg vet ikke hva dere synes. Det var jo litt. Det kommer mye mer, men jeg ser det er en dame som har lagt ut noe på nettet som noen linker til noen videoer, så der har jeg ikke vært inne og sett, men jeg vil bare si fra dere i tilfelle det blir kjedelig å sitte og se på det jeg ligger ut. Men i hvert fall så har vi nå gått gjennom det som jeg har drøyet med i mange måneder nå, og det har noe med hva amerikanerne drev med etter den annen verdenskrig, altså hva de drev og testet av forskjellige typer kjemikalier, grunnstoffer, og hva slags verktøy de brukte til dette her. Det fikk vi se litt av i disse her videoene, men den ene videoen da, men jeg kommer med andre videoer også som viser verktøyet. Og da snakker jeg om verktøy, det er jo da flya, ikke sant, og på hvilken måte de sprayer, altså hvilke ingredienser de har for å kunne spraye, blande tanker, aggregater og så videre og så videre. Så det blir mer sånne tekniske ting, men det jeg tenkte jeg skulle ta på meg nå, det var altså hva de brukte av midler for å teste ut det vi ser i dag. Og amerikaneren, han begynte også å teste ut med kjemikalier allerede like etter andre verdenskrig. Og fikk jo da, var jo da CIA, US Navy og US Military som startet opp da like etter krigen. Og de skaffet seg jo blant annet Werner von Braun i forbindelse med raketter og slike ting. Han jo da fra Tyskland. Så amerikaneren, de pengesterke som lever i dag, eller altså familiene som lever i dag, da, de hentet veldig mange flinke folk ifra Tyskland, og satte dem i arbeid da, og blant annet dannet NASA og alt det greiene der. Så det egentlig veldig, veldig mye og ganske komplisert, så jeg skal ikke gå noe nærmere inn på det. Men i hvert fall så tenkte jeg da å kjøre sendinger kanskje hver dag fremover for å vise noe av det som skjedde på Davos. Og da hadde jeg syntes det hadde vært veldig fint om vi eventuelt kunne få med folk i kommentarfeltet. Altså ikke bare i kommentarfeltet, men kanskje også være med i sendingen at vi kjører over YouTube, eller ikke YouTube, men Rumble, eller hva det andre heter? Ja, Skype. Så det hadde vært ganske interessant også å se folk, i stedet for at dere sitter bak en skjerm og driver og skriver, for jeg har jo opplevd så mange rare kommentarer som ikke har kommet ut til dere, for jeg har sittet og passet på, fordi at jeg synes ikke noe om at voksne folk skal få lov til altså rett og slett, for å si det på godt norsk, vise frem at de driter seg ut, altså. Det synes jeg egentlig bare dumt, så jeg prøver også å holde en viss stil i gruppa, og det har også noe med hva som legges ut ellers i gruppa, fordi at jeg har fått mange reaksjoner, altså advarsler, fra disse her faktasjekkere og det her greiene der. Så tidligere i dag så kunne jeg ikke skrive på Messenger til et par personer som flinke til å legge ut sånn på kanten som det Så da fikk vi en sånn liten straff her, og jeg følger med på disse her faktasjekkere. Jeg fullstendig klar over faktisk også hvem de men det skal ikke jeg komme inn på nå. Men hvis de gjør det ille, så ja. Nå har jeg tenkt på ellers, altså, jo, dette med at vi kan foreta sendinger, altså, nå folkens, utifra det som, jeg kan jo si såpass, utifra det jeg hørte fra disse herre som sitter nede i Davos, så må jeg si det at altså, skremme meg, det går ikke lenger, altså. Jeg bør ikke prøve på det. Og jeg bør ikke komme med sånne kommentarer som går på at jeg nærmer meg en eller annen lærer som var med i en serie for en del år siden. Og på Tørdal. Ja. Men jeg bryr meg ingenting. Dere kan si akkurat hva dere vil for noe om meg. Gjør meg ingenting. Dere får, altså dem som ikke vil høre på hva jeg sier og i det hele tatt, så det bare å slå av. Akkurat som på TV-en. Men der det brød og sirkus, så der må vi være, ikke sant? Så stille opp for folket, det norske folk, det blir et problem for sånne. Hva da med den dagen da brød og sirkus ikke finnes lenger? Den dagen da du må ha tillatelse til å gå utenfor døra di? Du tror ikke det at den kommer, du? Det første som kommer nå, det at du får lov til å bevege deg 15 minutter fra huset ditt. Du bør ikke tro annet enn at det kommer. For de har sagt det hele tiden, de har sagt det i mange år, de som sitter nede i Davos. Og våre, altså utsendinger fra Norge, sitter også der nede og klapper. De sitter der nede og hører på hva den der reptilgjengen sier. Hæ? Og folket her i Norge reagerer ikke i det hele tatt. De vil ikke høre på det. Hvis jeg går bort til folk i min alder, altså kan du si som besteforeldre og oldeforeldre i dag, så vil de ikke høre på hva jeg sier for noe angående, det jo geoingeniering som jeg snakker, eller værmodifisering, været som jeg snakker med folk om, som jeg kanskje kan litt om, i hvert fall det som har med årsaker og i det hele tatt det som skal til for at det blir sånn som det blir. De vil ikke høre på meg, de går vekk fra meg. De sier det at noen av dem jeg snakket med, de sier det at de har hatt mye vondt opp gjennom året, og nå har de det bra, så nå vil de ikke høre negative ting, og ting som gjør at tilværelsen deres blir dårligere. Det noen som kjenner seg igjen? Jeg håper inderlig det, for det kan jo ikke være bare meg som har kommet til det standpunktet. Jeg kan ikke skjønne annet enn at det må være feil. Bare for å ta et eksempel om akkurat det å følge med og i det hele tatt. Jeg skal komme med et eksempel til. Det 4500 som registrerte medlemmer i gruppa. Det meste som har vært inne her og så hørt på det nå, det 6 stykker. Greit at det en fredagskveld klokka 7, muligens at det har noe å si. Og jeg får inderlig håpe, i hvert fall ikke nødvendigvis for å høre på alt det skravlet jeg sier, men i hvert fall også se de videoene som jeg legger ut fra USA, som viser grunnlaget for det vi ser i dag. Og jeg vil ikke sitte her og klandre folk, eller jeg ikke sinnet på folk, eller selv om det kan virke sånn. Og det noen som sier til meg det at ja, du må ikke være så alvorlig i sendingene dine. Nei, men altså hvis det skal være annerledes, da jeg hyklersk. Og det håper jeg dere skjønner hva jeg mener med det. Fordi at vi i dag, altså menneskeheten i dag i forfall. Alt i forfall. Vannet, maten, været, og alt gærent. De ødelegger naturen tvert. Og det prøver jeg å belyse, selv om jeg ikke noe vitenskapsmann, jeg ikke noe høyt utdannet, jeg har bare en skarp 3-årig ingeniørutdannelse, og en pedagogisk utdannelse og en lang arbeidserfaring som leder. Men jeg klarer ikke å sitte rolig og så se på det som skjer. Jeg fikser ikke. Jeg blir syk. Jeg måtte ta meg noen måneders hvile, eller hva jeg skal kalle det her. Jeg var i en tur i Steinkjer i begynnelsen på september, og det begynte før det, altså. Jeg måtte ta meg sammen skikkelig for å kunne klare å fungere sånn noenlunde der oppe, men heldigvis traff jeg jo på så mange hyggelige mennesker som gjorde det lett for meg. Så det gikk den helgen der. Så, men da jeg kom hjem, da gikk jeg i kjelleren. Men det noe så, jeg skal ikke sitte her og fortelle hvor gærent jeg har, eller sånn. Jeg har hatt det bra i alle år, og har det også bra nå, men jeg klarer ikke å sitte rolig og bare se på og det som skjer rundt oss. For det kan vi ikke gjøre. Men bare for å avslutte nå da, så håper jeg, altså det var snakk om brød og sirkus i sted, og jeg er ikke noe psykolog, altså, men jeg vil foreslå nå videre fremover at dette med måten å uttrykke seg på, eller måten å ta disse her på, det å latterliggjøre dem. For det som deres, det de vil at vi skal bli forbannet og sinnet, og helst gå opp imot hverandre. De vil at, fordi at det det beste for dem, at vi krangler. Så hvis de da ser i en gruppe at det mye krangel, så synes jeg ser dem, da sitter de og gnir seg i hendene og synes dette her veldig bra. Og tenker sånn, så fy fader, for en dum gjeng vi har med å gjøre. Så, neida. Men nå det fredag, og klokka begynner å nærme seg kamp mellom Island og Sverige, og den skal jeg se. Jeg gammel håndballmålvakt og trener i mange år i håndball, så dette interesserer jeg meg for. Men jeg måtte på nå cirka en times tid for å vise litt av det stoffet her. Og mye mer stoff kommer så lenge jeg har muligheten, så lenge jeg puster, og så lenge jeg har muligheter til å bruke fingra, så vil dere se trynet mitt og det jeg driver med både på Facebook og på YouTube. Jeg har også YouTube og Rumble, og jeg legger over disse sendingene på YouTube like etter sendinga. Så det bare å gå over dit og abonnere. Det koster ingenting. Ok, da sier jeg takk for meg, og så ser vi, jeg nok på den igjen i morgen, tenker jeg. Hei då!